My name is David Rayner. The story that I'm about to tell you defies all my attempts at reasoning and logic, and when I think about it now, it chills me to my very core. It's beginning to close in on me, and I don't know if I'm gonna make it through tonight. If this is indeed my last testament to the world, then I need somebody out there to know that what happened to me was real, that these events did happen, and I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't a killer. I'll start from the beginning. Looking back, everything started about 8 years ago when I lost my entire family in a car accident. I know what you're thinking right now. Couldn't I have come up with something a little more original or creative? And trust me, if I could change what would happen, I would. I don't know how to explain it other than some things in life are a cliche for a reason, I guess. Besides, it wasn't even that particular incident that kicked this whole ordeal off, but just the beginning of the end for me personally. I had just turned 17, and my parents had taken out a loan to buy me this brand new car that I had no interest in learning how to drive. I tried my best to act excited, but my parents weren't really buying it. They were getting fed up with my moody teenager bit, as they put it, and they would force me to drive them around town, go to the grocery, or pick up my little sister, just something to get me out of my bedroom. All I wanted to do, though, was just listen to my music and work on my writing, my short stories. Something that my dad in particular thought was a complete waste of time. Well, I guess it wasn't such a waste of time after all, huh, Dad? I'm sorry. I love you, Dad. Always and forever. It all happened during one particularly stressful Saturday. I was driving all four of us back home from dinner in the family car when my dad started up on my car again and my lack of driving it. Do we really have to keep rehashing this, Dad? I don't want to talk about it anymore, I muttered almost under my breath. My dad, being as stubborn as he was, kept going on. I swear, what a waste of money this was. You have to be the only teenager I've ever met that doesn't want to drive. I would have killed for a car like that when I was a kid, my dad barked back. I lost it after all that. I never asked you to buy me a car. I don't need your damn pity. Stop trying to force me to do shit I don't want to do. I couldn't even believe what was coming out of my mouth. And neither could my dad, who screamed back at me. Listen here, you ungrateful little shit. Don't you ever talk to me or your mother that way. This is the kind of childish crap we'd expect from Destiny, not you. It was raining rather hard that afternoon, and the visibility was already getting bad. My dad standing next to me, irritating the shit out of me, wasn't helping either. I don't remember much of what happened next. The last thing I do remember before the crash was screaming at my dad as loud as I could to just shut the fuck up. I must have turned my eyes off the road because a chorus of car horns jerked my attention back in front of me. The car had swerved to the other side of the road, but as I tried to steer back, something weird happened. Something that, while makes complete sense to me now, I had no explanation for back then. I felt my entire body go numb. I couldn't explain it at the time, but my body just completely shut down, except for my eyes. My hands fell from the wheel as my head slipped sideways. My dad tried to grab the wheel, but it was too late. The car crashed through the barricade and we plunged off the bridge into the river below. The last thing I do remember before blacking out was Destiny's piercing screams as we fell, only to be sharply cut off once we hit the water. Then came the blackness, that cavernous, never-ending blackness. For what seemed like an eternity to me, I was stuck in that void. Although I couldn't see anything, I could feel something hovering just over me. I would try to look around, look up, look down, look in any direction, but there was nothing to see in this godforsaken place. The faint screams of my little sister still surrounded me, sounding almost like whispers now. As they faded away, so did all sensory perception. I could feel nothing, see nothing, hear nothing, taste nothing. I was suspended in an eternal void, unsure of how long I would even be there. And all the while, the feeling of some thing lurking right above me never left. The first thing that I became consciously aware of was a blinding white light. My vision was intensely blurry, and it was a good few minutes before I was able to make out my surroundings. I was in a hospital room. I could feel the numerous tubes coming in and out of my body. I struggled to get my hands moving, desperately trying to get someone's attention. I could hear my heart rate monitor going up, and soon afterwards a nurse came to check in on me. She must have been alarmed to see me awake because she backed out and began calling for someone else. The next few hours were another hazy blur, but eventually the doctors got some fluids and food into me, and I began to fully regain consciousness. The doctor told me that I had been in a coma for 3 weeks, and that it was a miracle that I was even alive at all. He asked me if I remembered anything. I was confused at first. I couldn't remember what happened. I asked how I got there. He said that my entire family and I were in a car accident on the bridge downtown. Before I could even ask, he told me that both my parents and my little sister had died in the crash, and that I should have as well. Even more puzzled now, I asked him what he meant. Your car was submerged underwater for almost an hour before a rescue team got down to you. We haven't been able to explain it, but you should be dead right now. The doctor explained to me in that typical, cold, and almost detached manners that most doctors use. I sat there, completely dumbfounded by what I was being told. I should be dead? How could this be? How did I survive? The memories started coming back to me all at once. My mind raced back to those final moments before I blacked out, my body freezing up, then that cavernous dark void and the dark presence that I felt while I was there. Everything made sense, but nothing made sense at the same time. We've been waiting for you to wake up, hoping that you could provide anything that would explain this to us. Can you tell me anything? My doctor asked. I stuttered. Should I tell them about the void? About my body freezing up? I can't remember anything. I'm sorry. No need to apologize. We've been running some tests and diagnostics for a couple of weeks, and now that you're awake, hopefully we'll get some answers. You just get your rest, David. We'll take good care of you, my doctor explained. He tried to be empathetic at the end there, but his icy tone never faltered. As he walked out of the room, the entire weight of the situation hit me at once. My parents were gone. My little sister, too. My entire world as I knew it vanished in just a single instance. I began dry heaving, but nothing came up. It dawned on me that I probably hadn't had real food in weeks. My head started spinning, not from the pain, but from the running train of thoughts in my head. I cried that entire night. Doctors and nurses came and went, and they tried their best to comfort me, but how do you comfort someone who's lost their entire life? Who's been told that they should be dead? I felt like a science experiment on show for the entire hospital. Their never-ending questions and invasive taking of my bodily fluids at vitals. And not once did any of them ever ask me if I was even okay. To them, the sheer fact that I had survived what no other person should have was more important than what was going on inside of my head, I guess. For the first couple of days, I completely shut down. I didn't eat, I didn't sleep, and I didn't even move out of my bed. I only relented in eating and drinking some water when the doctors threatened to sedate me and force-feed me through a tube. What little family members I had visit me every day, but even they couldn't break through to me. I was a loner in school, so I didn't have any real friends or even acquaintances to unload or vent to. I mean, not that I would have, even if I did. About a month later, I was discharged from the hospital, without the doctors ever finding anything even remotely out of place or abnormal with me. Whatever had saved my life and kept me alive was completely lost on my doctors and, to be honest, myself. I was ordered to visit a psychologist and to return to the hospital for regular checkups, neither of which I had any intention of doing. My grandpa on my dad's side, the only surviving grandparent I had left, took it upon himself to take me in. He didn't press me like the doctors did, being the semi-grouchy old man that he was. We weren't close by any means, and I had only seen him really a handful of times throughout any given year, but we were still family, and considering my options, he was probably my best bet. He did have enough heart, though, to take care of me and let me grieve in my own way. I feel selfish now thinking about how I never comforted him for the loss of his only child. Though, if that had had any effect on him, I never saw it. My grandfather was stoic to the very end. I mourned my family intensely. As cold and unemotional as I was towards everything else, I cried myself to sleep every night from the loneliness. My parents and I never really saw eye to eye on anything, and I felt myself drifting away from the nest long before the accident, but they were still my parents. They loved me and I loved them, but it was my sister that truly broke my heart. Of all the people I'd ever known or met, Destiny was the only one I felt ever truly understood me. And she loved my short stories and always requesting a new one for me to read to her every night before she went to bed. Our parents could never afford a babysitter, so I would step up to the plate every time they needed me to. And one of the few times I actually took my car out by myself, I took Destiny and I to Gaddyland for a day. The place had seen better days. Chairs were in bad shape, the place was a little dingy, and the food was bland as usual, but for Destiny, it might as well have been a tropical paradise. We played games for hours, draining away all the money I had on cheap toy prizes. I even squeezed myself into one of those tiny bumper cars meant for the ages 10 and under and chased her around in circles. She was the only person I ever truly bonded with. the only glimmer in my dark, lonely existence. Weeks went by, then months. One afternoon, sometime shortly before my graduation, my grandpa and I were sitting in the living room, silently watching reruns of some old TV show that he watched all the time. I hadn't spoken much since moving in with him, and I rarely ventured out of my bedroom. I would sit there for days at a time, wishing I could just vanish and reappear somewhere else in the world. Almost as if he could read my thoughts. My grandpa finally spoke up. "Do you even want to be here, son?" I looked over, bewildered by what he had just said. And for a split second, I thought he was talking to someone else, but it was just us. "What do you mean?" I asked back. "And it's a simple question, David. You've barely left this house since you got here. You never talk to no one. You don't go out with friends. You don't even write those stories your dad was always going on about. You just go to school, come back, and go to bed. It's almost like you don't even exist." I sat there staring at him. My grandpa certainly wasn't the one you'd call an intellectual, and certainly never came off as intuitive. But here he was, practically peering inside my head, and doing a very good job of it, I might add. I was suspicious at first, not knowing what to think of this sudden change of heart. "Is this your nice way of kicking me out?" I asked in a curt, almost accusatory way. And to his credit, my grandpa didn't raise his voice or get angry with me the way my dad surely would have. "Of course not, David. Trust me, you'd know if I was kicking you out." He paused for a moment, then continued. "No one here, or anywhere else probably, could possibly understand what you've gone through and how much you're suffering. You think I don't notice, but I do. I don't know. Maybe you'd be happier somewhere else, someplace far away from here, where no one knows what happened and you can start over, do whatever you need to do." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My grandpa, for all the time I had ever known him, never showed this kind of understanding or compassion. Not to me, at least. Maybe it was a side effect of us practically having no relationship during most of my life, but it was a surprise for me, and I didn't know what to think or say to him. I mulled over it for a moment, and then finally spoke up. "Even if I wanted to go, I don't have a job or any money." "Nice try, David. You and I both know your folks wouldn't leave you high and dry like that," my grandpa retorted. "It's true. My parents had left plenty of insurance money for me, probably to use for college, I assume, but they hadn't left any instructions in their will. It was for me to use once I turned 18, which would be a couple of days after graduation." "Where would I even go, Grandpa? I've never even left the state before," I said, offering up one last pathetic excuse. We both knew where this conversation was heading. "I don't know, David. Only you do. I love you, kiddo, but you're not happy here. And everyone can see it. I know you want to leave. You might be scared shitless. Hell, I was when I left home. But trust me, once you leave, you'll never look back. You gotta take care of yourself, David. No one else is gonna do it for you." My grandpa preached, almost as if he was giving a sermon instead of talking to his own grandson. We sat there in silence for a few moments, with only the sound of the TV in the background. My grandpa spoke up again. "You can always come back if you choose to leave. I ain't going nowhere, never have. 40 years. There's nothing keeping you here besides you, David. What are you waiting for?" I pored over those last words that entire night. Yes, I so desperately wanted to leave. I could feel this almost magnetic tug in my gut, pulling me far away from here. And yes, I would have all the money I would need to go somewhere else in a couple of weeks. But I was so afraid of what I might find or not find out there. I'd never been on my own like that before. A few days later, I graduated high school, and I even started applying for colleges. But then one day, I finally left. I told my grandfather goodbye and got in my car and just took off. I had no idea where I was gonna go, but I just drove, hoping I'd find a new home somewhere else in the world. Everything else in my life was gone, and there was nothing left for me here. I just needed a fresh start. I drove all over the country, coast to coast. I saw and experienced so many things that I never imagined I would in my wildest dreams. I met some amazing people that I'd call friends under any other circumstances. But I would always be pulled away by that same magnetic urge that caused me to leave in the first place. No matter where I'd go and where I travel, I'd eventually be pulled away to some new, unknown destination. That's when the nightmares first started. It was the void. That endless expanse of nothingness. From before, I'd go to sleep and only to find myself trapped in that Stygian gulf of the unknown. The faint screams of destiny and my family would echo all around me. Occasional flashes would come over me every so often. They were of me, only I was different, older, and changed somehow. I looked weathered and utterly terrified. Some of these visions were just split-second images. Others were longer. There was one where I was covered in blood, but I didn't seem to be hurt, at least not physically. That same primal fear was smeared across my face underneath all the blood. The image was ungodly. These images and others would come and go the entire nightmare. And the entire time, that same malignant presence that I felt looming over me the first time would never leave. It haunted me, plaguing me like some sentient virus. Unrelenting, unforgiving. The nightmares didn't come every night. I could go weeks without having one. But eventually, as all things do, they would find me again. Subconsciously, I think this is why I was so determined to get out of wherever I was. I knew it was only a matter of time before the nightmares began again. And I would do anything to get away from them. So I continued my nomadic existence, chasing after whatever was pulling me away. Eventually, I stopped settling down altogether. No matter how far I traveled, the nightmares and the urge to leave would never stop. So I stopped them the only way I knew how, by running away entirely. I traveled to every state, almost every major city I came across along the way. I even traveled to Mexico for a time, but I was strangely pulled back north by that urge. It became second nature to me, something I didn't even question. Whatever was happening to me, I couldn't even begin to explain it. But, and this is going to sound even crazier, I grew to not fear the nightmares or that entity that would haunt me. Whatever it was, I couldn't see it, but I never felt like it wanted to harm me. It felt cold, and I could feel the hate radiating from whatever it was, but it never felt directed at me. I almost felt a sort of telepathic link or whatever. And something inside of me couldn't shake the feeling that whatever it was responsible for this magnetic pulls and the nightmares that I could never seem to shake. And it felt responsible for the accident and that out-of-body experience, or whatever you want to call it, that happened to me. It was almost as if it was guiding me to some specific place, only I could never figure out where it was. Throughout all of it, though, I kept in contact with my grandpa, telling him of my travels, but never about the nightmares. He was the only family, or the only person for that matter, that I even bothered to keep in touch with. We spoke every so often, most of the time when I was in the process of moving to a new city again. He sounded intrigued by my gypsy life, as he called it, confessing that he wished he had traveled more in his younger years. He expressed some concern here and there, but otherwise was completely oblivious to the literal nightmare that my life had become. As the months went by, I could hear my grandpa getting sicker and sicker, but being as bullheaded as he was, he never admitted to it. I offered to come back and take care of him the best I could, but that only seemed to insult him. Our calls to each other became less and less frequent, until one day they stopped altogether. At age 77, my grandpa passed away in his sleep. I came back to the city just this one time to attend the funeral. It's equal parts bizarre and completely gut-wrenching to bury your entire immediate family. I kept it in as much as I could, but whenever I was alone, I would break down completely. I got more than a couple of judgmental looks from the other members of my family, but I never paid them any attention before, so why should I now? After the funeral, I left my hometown for the last time, and as my grandfather predicted, I never looked back. The nightmares would see to that. After 6 years of traveling on the road, I finally settled down here in Coldwater, Kentucky. I'd been traveling through the southern states for several months, and the pull I felt had begun to strengthen in intensity as I got closer and closer to Coldwater. I didn't intend to stay here long. My car had been running on borrowed time by that point, finally starting to creak under the immense strain of driving across countries for years. While I got my car inspected and hopefully repaired, I decided to stay in town for a few weeks. Nightmares be damned. But, to my astonishment, they didn't come back. I waited and waited, afraid to sleep for any long period of time, but nothing. Even that urge, that pull to move on had vanished too. And as quickly as this phantasm, or whatever the hell it was, had come into my life and completely upended it, it was gone. For the first time in 6 years, or maybe even my entire life, I felt free. I felt like I had finally found a sanctuary here in this little village called Coldwater, of all places. I had never even been to Kentucky before, but strangely, it felt like I had always been here. With what little remained of my insurance money, I rented an apartment and slowly tried to rebuild a life. I searched for a job, but without much work experience and no college degree, it was very slim pickings for sure. Coldwater, a small town as it was, still had a local newspaper that I managed to get a job at as a writer. They hadn't adapted to the 21st century like most of the rest of the country. It was almost a relic of a time gone by. Local grocery stores, knick-knack shops, town fairs. Nothing like the big city I grew up in. I began to acclimate to this new environment. 1 week turned into 1 month, that turned into 2 years. I sent word to my remaining family that I'd finally found a home and they were welcome to come visit me, but they never did. They sent their best wishes, of course, and I got an occasional invite to a family function or a Christmas card or something of that nature, but they never set foot in Coldwater. I was secretly happy that they did. My old life was now a distant memory that I just wanted to forget. The mourning for my family never really stopped. But as the years had gone by, I learned to grow numb to it. You never get over the loss of those closest to you. You just learn to live with the pain. I miss them terribly. Destiny the most. That round, smiling face, just full of an angelic innocence. But I was relieved that their voices no longer haunted my sleep. As terrible as I was at making friends in my old life, here in Coldwater, it was an entirely different story. I adapted to small town life pretty quickly. My car had finally given up, and I decided to go green and start biking back and forth to work and wherever I needed to go. I lost some weight, I got into shape, and I even started dating. I'd always known I was gay, but I never told anyone, not even Destiny. Not because my family wouldn't have approved. They asked me several times if I was, telling me that they would love me no matter what. That side of me, though, was just so foreign that I didn't even know how to process it myself, let alone tell anyone about it. I met this really great guy at the newspaper, Tristan. He was tall, fit, and insanely funny, something I didn't know very much about. He did the deliveries, and it took a while at first, this being small town Kentucky and all, but he eventually asked me if I wanted to go out sometime. I said yes before he had even finished his sentence. I'd never been in love before, but here it was happening to me. I'd also threw myself back into my writing, not just for work either. I had written down so many great ideas over the years, but I stopped writing them whenever I came up with a new idea. I started writing news stories with a vengeance. They became a fixture of the local paper, with readers sending me their own stories and reviews of my work. Tristan had a fondness for horror, and he quickly became my biggest fan, among other things. I never thought it would happen, but I had finally found myself and my own happiness. The years of traveling, nightmares, mourning, had all led to this new life that I built out of nothing. It didn't even feel real. I kept waiting for the nightmares to come back for months, for that dark figure to find me again. And it never did. And life, as it does, just went on. The freak accident that had initiated this entire ordeal had begun to slip into the recesses of my mind. Never fully out of sight, but finally shielded from view. Whatever mysterious, supernatural thing that had kept me alive, I didn't care anymore. I didn't want to remember. It was just a sad reminder of a life I no longer knew. Or so I had hoped. I prayed that the darkness had finally left. that those awful images and screaming were locked away in the past. That the monster that had been hunting me for 6 years was gone, its thirst for me unsatiated. I was wrong. I was so wrong. It was just waiting for me to find it.